Hi, this is Joe Bolen, and welcome back to learning about VisualBasic.net. In our last video, video number 76, we created an inquiry screen using a data reader. Well, we're going to take that project and we're going to learn more about the connection string. In that project, it was strictly a prototype project, a project just to quickly create the information, display the data, and give it a way for a user to see what their request would look like in a very quick manner, but not for production purposes. We hard-coded in that program the connection string. And so I'd like to talk about that connection string, where it should be placed, how we should code it, and also how to find connection strings. As we're working with different databases, be it a MySQL, or a Microsoft Server, Microsoft Server Express, or local data, or even Microsoft Access database, we need to know how to get the correct connection string to access those data sources. Also, we need to be able to modify them and know how to encrypt that information so that a person who is trying to do malicious harm to our system cannot see critical data that should be hidden and not available to be seen. So let's take a look at our program, learn about connection strings and how to hide them and where to place them in our program. Okay, I have up on the screen our last project, the inquiry screen, and as you might remember if you've already watched that video, but I'll remind you nevertheless that we had a text box that we put on a tool strip area with a search button that we would search by last name to find names that begin with whatever we put in the text box. That then would go out, in this case, to a Microsoft Access database, retrieve the data with a data reader, and then present the data to our user interface with a data grid view. Well, let's take a look at the actual program running so we get an idea of what this does. So I'm going to compile it and we'll start it. And here is our form. And I'm going to hit B for all records that begin with the last name of B. Hit the search. And you'll see I have two names that came in with the last name beginning with B. And it came in fairly fast. And presented just the data we wanted to see. Now, this is a good program for inquiry screen or the beginning parts to going into a maintenance screen by bringing up first the records we might want to maintain. And so this is a good basis to learn how to code things. But one of the things I did when I created this was a prototype version where I hard-coded the data, the connection string. So let's take a look at the actual code where I did that. And I'm going to expand this a little bit. And you'll see that I had coded a constant variable called con_string where I had the actual connection string information to access my Northwind database. Well, before we go any further, let's find out more information about where the documentation for this presentation and our original bare bones data reader was at. At the top here, you'll see the original bare bones data reader from video 76 is at PaySpin, and you can go out and take a look at the code that I'm starting out with. And then also at PaySpin is the general data reader that I'll end up with at the end of this video. And so you can go out and study those different code sources to see how I change things to deal with the connection string. So if you'd like to pause your video at this time, you might want to write down these URLs and then go out later on and study in detail further what I did in this video. Okay, let's get back to our task at hand, and that is to deal with this connection string. Well, first of all, let's learn a little bit about connection strings. As you see here, we have the provider that we're using. In this case, it's the Microsoft Access Jet Engine, the OLEDB. We have a data source, in this case Northwind, and then we have security credentials. And these are the three basic things that are needed in a connection string. And I invite you to also go to the source up above, www.connectionstrings.com, and learn more about connection strings, especially as you're working with certain databases and how you're accessing it, be it by TCP IP or by your pipes or names on the LAN. So this is an important website that will help you a lot to understand about connection strings. But let me take you further into our dealing with connection strings. Let me switch a little bit here for a second. And I'm going to take you over to a PowerPoint slide that talks about connection strings. And if we're accessing, for example, a Microsoft Server SQL database, we're going to access that by a server name and then the backslash and then the instant name of their particular database that we're using. Now, if it's a Microsoft Server SQL database, it would be /MS SQL Server, or just which means the local machine. Now, this is when we have the server actually on our machine we're working with. Now, if it's on a different machine, of course, the dot would be replaced with the name of the computer where it's at or the IP address where it's at. But the instant name would be MS SQL Server if we're going to key that in. Now, I use Microsoft's free version of the Express, and here's where I key in /SQL Express. And that takes me to the version that I'm working with. Now, I want you to note that if we use the parentheses, local parentheses, or the dot, we're using what's called pipes. And that makes it very easy to access. Or we could key in local host instead of the dot, and that is actually using the IP address of 127.0.0.1. So we can test our TCP IP access or our access through the pipes mechanism to access our Microsoft SQL server. Now, if we're accessing a local DB, it's a little bit different, and it depends also on the version of Microsoft SQL Server that you have installed. If you have the newer version, perhaps you downloaded the 2015 Community Edition Visual Studio, well, you'll have the newer version, and you will have the local Express version on your machine. If you download separately the Express version as an add-on package, you'll have either 2014 or 2015 on your machine. And there's where you use the local DB in parentheses, /MS SQL local DB. Now, if you happen to have the older 2012 Express, there's where you use the /V11.0. And then you would think as you would go from the 2012 version of Microsoft's SQL Server Express to the 2014 or 2016, that version number would change, but in fact they changed that over to use MS SQL local DB for the instance name. So do note there are some differences depending on what version of the SQL Express you're using, and also if you are using that, you need to use local DB in parentheses as the server name to access that. Okay, let's go back to our task here, and we go back to our code, and I want to bring to your attention once again the code that we're working with. We're looking at this connection string. Well, let's find out how I got it first of all. And one of the ways we get that kind of information is we go up to the view on our menu area, click that on, and hit the Server Explorer. And the Server Explorer pops up, and we can use that to see some connections. And you see in here, I already have SQL Express instance to the Northwind, but I'll show you how I access it and modify it. For example, if I wanted to work with the Express version of Northwind, I could come over here to it and I could hit the modify connection and take a look at the connection string. And it'll bring up the connection area for modify connection. You'll see the server name. Here I use the dot for local and then the backslash SQL Express. And you see Northwind is the database that I'll be accessing with that connection. But I want to draw your attention to the Advanced tab. In the Advanced tab, we can see better the actual connection string that we would use to access this particular database on the Microsoft SQL Express version. And it's down here in the box, and you can just highlight this, hit Control-C, and copy it, and then bring it into your program. So you can see the data source here. You can see the initial catalog of what you're accessing, and then also the security information, which is up above here, is also in this case in our string below. So you can just slide through and hit a Control-C to copy it, and you'll have that information for your program. So we're using Modify Connection, and then we're going to the Advanced button to see that. If I'm creating a new connection, and I'm going to come up here and right-click and go for a new connection, by Add Connection, this will bring up the Add Connection wizard, and once again we can key in different ways to access that. Now the first one I wanted to bring to your attention, and the one I use the most for a SQL Server Express, is /SQL Express. Then I'm going to tab out and then come down below, and you'll see that I pulled in a number of names that came in that I have in my Express version. I can also have keyed in here the local in parentheses /SQL Express. Tab out of that, and once again we'll see that we have a number of databases. One other way is to actually key in my computer name. Mine is Hades. It just came in. Then /S Hades /SQL Express. It popped in real quickly. And then hit the drop down, and you'll see I've got it that way. A lot of people try to key in their server name and they don't remember what it is. That's why I recommend using just the dot. If it's on your local machine, just the dot /SQL Express will get your instance name to your server, and you can get to your databases. Now, this is for Microsoft SQL Server. What if I wanted to also go by IP address to that server? Well, I can do that by using localhost. That'll get resolved, and I'll show you how it gets resolved in just a second. Okay, there is localhost /SQL Express. Now I'm coming in by TCP IP, hit the drop down, and I get the results again. Or I can key in the IP address. Now, if you happen to be working, especially with a server that's not on your machine, this is where you key in that IP address. But I'm going to key in the same thing at localhost, which is 127.0.0.1. Come out and tab, and I'll also get it that way. And there it's loaded in. So remember, we can use the IP address, the local host IP address, or just the name localhost. Or if I'm coming in by pipes, I can come in with /SQL Express, or in parentheses local in parentheses /SQL Express to come into it. So there are different ways we can come in and access that. The important thing is once I get there, I can then modify and look at my connection string. Well, what if I'm not using a Microsoft SQL Server or the Express version? Well, we come up and we still do an add connection, but we come up and change our data source with the button, and we see that we have a number of possibilities. I'm going to start out first of all with Oracle. If I had an Oracle database, you'd think to choose this, but this is actually now a depreciated data provider. You really should put on the brand new provider when you're working with an Oracle database. If you have like MySQL, you'll also install your provider information into Visual Studio so that it'll show up in this window as well. Microsoft does provide, though, the providers to its own products. And here we see the Microsoft SQL Server and also the server database file is another way to come in. Now, older databases or some other types of databases use ODBC as their connection method, and you choose that one if you're using that one. Now, Microsoft Access database file uses OLDB, and so I'm going to click on the Microsoft Access one, and you'll see information here. You'll also see the information about the data provider as well down below here. We're using the OLDB data provider with Microsoft, and I'm going to hit OK. And here we see Add Connection, and what we do is we go out and do a browse. I'm going to hit the Browse button, and my database that I keep is in a normal place on my U drive. And so I go to my U drive, Databases, and you'll see that I have an Access database folder, and there is my Northwind database that I'm going to be accessing. So I'll hit Open, and I'm going to test the connection. I have a good test connection, which is what I want to see. Now I'm going to hit the Advanced button. I'm going to expand this out a little bit so you can see it. And you'll see I've got my information about the provider. I've got the data source in there. The only thing missing is my persistent security info as false. And so that's the one thing you'll have to remember to key in. But I can grab this information real quickly, do a Control-C and copy it and bring it out. Now, using that, we can also take advantage of activating that connection. And you'll see now that I can take a look at the Northwind database in my Server Explorer and click on the caret there. See my tables. Within that, we'll be using the customer table, so I can click on that, see all the different columns or fields, if you want to use the old term. And I can also query the data as well as see all the data. So I can hit Retrieve Data, and it'll pull it up, and here's just a part of the information that's showing here as we look at all the data that came in. So we can look at the data, we can query it, we can see the different fields, we can take a look at it by using the Server Explorer to do that. Remember, we're looking at the connection to that. In fact, I can now at this point delete that connection, and I'll be fine because I have the information I need. So it asks, are you sure you want to remove the database connection? It's just the information about how we're connecting, not the database itself. So I'm going to close that down. And as I said, I already have that information that I pulled in from that information we just gathered, and I put it in a nice string that runs this particular program. But this is not a good place to put it, and we shouldn't hard code this information. I want to show you where we should put it. We should put it actually in a folder called the APP.CONFIG folder, I should say, file. If you do not see the APP.CONFIG file, make certain you click on your Show All Files button. If you do not see it after you click on Show All Files button, then you may have to go out to your project, right-click, hit Add, and then you'll say Add New. And when you come to Add New, you'll come to the area called General, and you'll see the APP.CONFIG file template that we can pull in. And you'll see the name down below comes in for that we can use. So if you are missing that after you check with Show All Files, pull in from your templates the app configuration file. Okay, well, we have the app.config file. Let's take a look at that. And I'm going to change the size of the screen here a little bit so I can see it better. And you'll see it's just very simple. And this is an XML file. And we're going to add information in here. And this is the place where we put our connection string information. So I'm going to add some space here and a new tag. And our IntelliSense will come up and we can quickly find connection strings as the tag I'm entering in. And that gives us our first block. Then we're going to add to our connection string with an add. Then we're going to add a name. And this is the name we're going to reference our connection string. And since I'm going against the Northwind database, I'm just going to call this Northwind DB. Show me I can spell right. Northwind DB. So that's the name I'm going to give to it. I'm going to come over here, and then I'm going to add the connection string itself. And I'm going to leave that empty for a moment. We'll come back and fill that in just a second. And then we have to put in our provider name on that. And our provider name, if I was going against a SQL database, would be system.data.sql client. But we're going against a Microsoft database, which we're using OLEDB. So instead of SQL client, it'll be OLEDB for the provider name. Now let's get our connection string information that we need in. So I'm going to go back to where we had that hard-coded in our form, and I'm just going to grab this whole area, and then we'll clean it up when I get it over to the other side. I'm going to hit a copy, come back over to my app.config file, and I'm going to replace the config string here with what I just brought in. And I have to clean this up because it's a different type. This is an XML file. So I'm going to get rid of some of those extra parts I had when I was working with just the Visual Basic part. And let me hit it. And get rid of that one right there. And now our string should be perfectly fine. We brought that in, and once again you see that I have the provider name, the data source. In this case it's the Northwind database, and then I have my security credentials to access it. So I have all that information now in my app.config file, and I can reference that by using the Northwind DB name to get that. Okay, let's save that. And then I'm going to close out the app.config file. Now I'm going to come back over to my program here, and what I'm going to do into my program is add a new data layer to it. Right now this is all the only one layer, and it's all basically the user interface layer on that. We're going to add what's called a data access layer to separate things up, and I do that by adding a new project. So I go to Solution area and I right click and say Add, and I'll say New Project, and then my wizard will come up, and one of the things I can add on my new project is a class library on that for this one. And I'm going to give this one the name of DAL for Data Access Layer. Data Access Layer is the part that's going to interface with our database, and so everything with the database will be in that project. If I had business objects I wanted to deal with, I would have a business logic layer as well. But this one only requires a data access layer that we're going to be adding. So I'm going to add that in. And now our project looks a little different, and you'll see that I now have in my solution area new project with class 1. Well, I really don't need class 1, so I'm going to rename this one. I'm hitting rename. And I'm going to call this Northwind DB is my new class, and it'll get renamed over here. Now this new class that I'm going to have is going to be how I access my particular app config file that I have in the other project. So what I want to do first of all is come over to the reference area of the data access area. I'm going to add a new reference in by right-clicking and hitting Add Reference on that. And I'm going to go to the Assemblies area, and I'm going to scroll down and add the system.configuration right there. And hit OK. And that adds that one into my project. Okay, now in my project itself, I'm going to add 2 import statements to make it easier to type. So the first import statement I'm going to add is I'm going to bring in that data access, or not data access layer, the system configuration that I just added as a reference. Also, since I'm working with the OLEDB, I'm going to import that as well. Now, once again, if I was working with Microsoft SQL, this would be SQL client, not OLEDB. Okay. Now, currently they're sort of grayed out because I haven't referenced them yet, but in a moment we're going to add that reference. Okay, within my class I'm going to create a public function, and this class does not need to be instantiated to use this function I'm going to be creating because it's going to be a shared function. So I'm going to hit public shared, and that means I don't have to instantiate it. And I'm going to create a function, and this is going to be get connection. And as what I'm going to return in this case is the actual connection. In this case, it's going to be an OLEDB connection on that. Now, once again, if I was working with Microsoft SQL Server, it'd be an SQL connection. So I'm returning back the actual connection in this function. And so I'm going to declare a string, and I'm going to call it CONN as string, and it's going to be equal to configuration manager dot connection string, and within that I'll put the name that we had in our app config file, which was Northwind DB, and then I finish it up by converting it to a string by saying connection string. There we go. So I pull in with this line using the configuration manager of the system.configuration library the information to pull that in and get the connection string. Then I return back with my function. So I hit return, and what I'm returning is a new OLEDB connection, and in that we pass in our parameter of our connection that we're working with. So there we go. We have everything tightly done in that one little function. We're going out. When I call this function from anywhere, get connection, it'll go out through the connection manager, retrieve from the app config file the information that's contained in the Northwind DB named part of the connection string, pull that in as a string, then return back an OLEDB connection to our program that might have called that. So this is all it takes to get that done. And now we've isolated our app config file as the information about the connection. We have now a function to get that information. So let's now go back to our inquiry form. At this point, I don't need this information, so I'm just for now going to comment it out. Okay. Now you're going to see right away that I've got an error down below here. And that's this spot right here that's causing the error. Because now we don't have the literal string we're passing in. We're going to be going out using the function. So one of the things I want to do to make this easier is I'm going to come back up here at the top. I'm going to go to the project that I have here at the top and add another reference to this project. I'm going to right click here and I can add a reference to the data access layer. So I click on projects. There's my data access layer. I'm going to hit OK. And that pulls in that reference to this part of the project, or I should say the solution. Okay, now let's go back. We're going to add now one other thing to our imports to make it easier to code. We're going to enter in DAL. And that'll allow us to reference the classes and functions within this a little bit easier in our project. So now with that being done, I've got the import statement in. I'll just come down here. Since I'm already making a new instantiation of it in my other class, I don't need the new keyword anymore. And what I'm going to be doing is assigning instead of instantiating here. So I'm going to use the equal sign and then use my function, which is in my Northwind DB class. So I key in Northwind DB, and I'm going to get the get connection function, and that's going to pull that information in and run it. Well, let's see if we've got it right. I've commented it out, so I'm not using the connection string here anymore. I'll have to be using the one from the APP.CONFIG file if everything's coded right. So let me save everything and run it. Save all. Start. There's our program. That part's running. I'll type in B and hit search, and there are my two records. And now I'm using the APP.CONFIG file to get my connection string information. Now let's take a look at the benefits of doing what I just did. Let me come back to our Solution Explorer, and I want to take you to the area where we have our APP.CONFIG file. Okay, let me make that big again. Here's the information that we needed to get to it. And right now, it's in our Solution Explorer. As we compiled that, in this case, we compiled it as a debug mode, not release. It created that same file in our project. So let me show you that. And I'm going to change this perspective here a little bit. As we compiled it, it went to the bin folder. In this case, it went to the debug folder, and actually it is that file right there. I'll double click on it and you'll see the same file information came in that's now in our debug area under the full name of the program .exe.config. Okay, well, what does that do for me? Well, first of all, right now, it makes things easy to modify. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that. Okay, let me close this down. Okay, let's go back to this area, and I'm going to go to the folder itself, the debug folder. I'm going to right click and hit Open Folder in File Explorer. Okay. Now here is the actual program, and you can see I can run it right here. If I click on it, click in B, and we'll see I get my two records. There they are. Okay, now I have also, for this exercise, copied my Access database file to my desktop. And this represents deploying the program where I may not know in advance where it's going to be located. And so now I have a different location, and now I'm going to go to the config file. I'm going to right click on it and open with Notepad. There it is. You'll see how simple it is on that. There it is in our actual compiled program. And I'm going to change the location where this is at now. I'm going to go to my desktop. Okay, so I've changed that. And so after putting this out and deploying it somewhere, I might go in and modify this to the user's location or production server. I'm going to save that. Okay, now let's run this. Now I'm going to go against my desktop, not the one that I originally started with. And you'll see that now I have 3 records, not 2. You see I put in a record for myself in there. So I'm actually going against the database located on my desktop. It could be in another location, but I just used the desktop for a simple illustration that we can quickly modify the APP.CONFIG file to relocate and target where our production database is located. Well, that also proposes a problem for us. One of the things is that in our config file, just to remind you, we have in there a couple of things that may not want anybody to see. We may not want them to know where they're going at all, where the production database is located. And especially if I had something in here about security credentials to the database. I wouldn't want anybody to be able to see that information. And so this becomes a potential security risk in a production environment. So what do? Well, the beauty about it is, first of all, I can modify it, but I can also encrypt it. And Microsoft gives us the tools to do that, and I'm going to show you how that works. So let me switch over the view here to my desktop. I'm going to minimize everything so I get to a utility. But before I do that, I'm going to get the path to this one. I'll copy it so we can get to it real quick. Now I'm going to minimize my desktop. I'm going to bring up this little utility that I have. And I'm going to click on encryption, hit the browse button. And I'm going to come down to file name, paste that in, and hit open. It'll take me to the location I want. I'm going to hit open, and I'm going to encrypt it. And now you'll see that all of a sudden that new file is now encrypted and is not human readable anymore. And I've made my configuration file such that it is encrypted and hidden. But does it still work after I do that? Well, let's try our program again. So I'm going to close that out and close that out. Come back to our program on that. Let me get back to the information that we need to see here. Okay, let's right click on here and go back to open folders in File Explorer. Now I'm going to click on this. Remember, now it's we have made it encrypted. I'm going to click on it again, type in B, and hopefully everything works, and it does. We're going against the desktop. We're going against an encrypted APP.CONFIG file that we now have in production. So you see the advantage is I can quickly modify the information on that. Now once again, I'll show you that it is encrypted on that. The one I was going against is now something that's not really easily for a human to understand without being able to decrypt it. And it redirects it to a different location because I modified this config file after I put it in production. So let's go back and take a look at the important things to remember. As we're working with a connection string, we need to have the provider, we need to have the data source, and the security credentials. That makes it up. But we don't want to hard code that. We want to put it in our APP.CONFIG file in our program so we can reference it by a name to get that information. Then we create a quick utility program to go out and retrieve that information and return back a connection. Once again, this could be an SQL connection, not an OLE DB connection. But the same code's there with just a little bit of modification on that. So it gets that back, and then we come back to our program itself, and we get access to it by using that function and coming into our program. Well, that gets us pretty well going with our program at this point. The important thing to remember is we do not want to hard code the configuration string in our program. We want to move it to the APP.CONFIG file, giving it a special name that we can reference. Then we pull that into our program as we need it to access the connection. We're going to put some more data in our next video in that data access layer of our program to make this program truly a production version on that. Right now we're just using it to get the access information or connection string information to the database. I'll show you how we can take advantage of that data access layer to do other things and truly separate our code to make it easier to maintain, to add to as well. And I think you'll see that it's not that difficult to start to get into the concepts of breaking things up into small classes, putting some of the classes in their own special project folder, making references to those folders on that. So what I want to bring to your attention once again is go back to look at pastebin here and take a look at those locations where I have the data. You'll see everything that I just did out there at pastebin, and I want you to study that and learn how to use the APP.CONFIG file. And if you want to pursue it even further, you can learn about how to program the encryption part that encrypts the APP.CONFIG file as well. The important thing is to learn how to do that, encrypt it, take advantage of it. And you saw how I used the Server Explorer part of Visual Studio to go out with the right provider to find the connection string and copy it and bring it into my program to modify and use it. So with that kind of information, you're ready to go to start getting your hands dirty in the code, practicing, and learning how to take advantage of the APP.CONFIG file with your connection string. So until next time, take care. I'll see you soon.